Hello, in section B of the module on refugees, we focus very much on Europe. Europe as reflected by the European Union and the steps that the European Union has taken with regards to having a common refugee policy, and also the Council of Europe, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the interaction of the European Convention and particular articles of the European Convention on the application of refugee law. Turning initially to the European Union, of course the European Union has a political vision, a vision of one Europe in which there is an elimination of internal barriers. As these internal barriers were dismantled, then it became increasingly important for the member states to ensure that there was a common external barrier, so that persons who came from outside the Union were treated in the same way, irrespective of their point of entry to the Union. And of course, what has happened is that with regards to refugees, the European Union has adopted a European asylum system. And we discuss that in section B. We look, for example, at the main landmarks, the main stepping stones, if you like, to the realization of a European asylum system, European asylum policy. We then look at the European approach and the text of the Qualifications Directive and the recast version of the Qualifications Directive, and how it fits or sits with the 1951 Convention. And we ask the question, does it fit with the 1951 Convention, or are there instances where there is a departure? We also look at the Minimum Standards Directive, the way in which there are minimum standards for reception, and also minimum standards for return of persons who are failed asylum seekers, particularly if these are minors, children, in other words, those under 18. We also look at the attempt to have a simplified or streamlined procedure for refugee application as reflected in the Dublin regulation, and we look at the provisions of what is now Dublin II. Then focus changes in the latter part of section B to the interaction of the European Convention with the application of refugee policy, and how Article 8 in particular, the rights to private and family life, have been played out on the European scene, and have been played out in domestic courts with respect to those who may risk or those who may be deported from a particular member state. For example, what happens if a parent is a non-national and the marriage is dissolved and the individual loses his or her right to remain? What about the impact on any children? And to what extent are the rights of the child taken into account and weighed up? That also raises the issue too of the best interests of the child, which of course reflects an international convention. And that too is discussed, albeit relatively briefly, in the section, because of course the section B is dealing with the European dimension. So the whole engagement of the European Convention and its implications for refugee law is examined. So section B is very much a focus on Europe, the measures that have been adopted by the European Union to ensure that there is a common, or endeavouring to ensure that there is a common external policy, and also that the European Convention is implemented and the way in which it is implemented, and the way in which it can act to allow an individual who may not necessarily have rights to stay other than rights which can be which arise from the Convention. So that is a brief overview of the contents of Section B and what you may expect to be considering in Section B.